name is Tawess, and today we're doing something a bit different. Today I'm gonna give you a quick and easy guide to how you can paint skin quickly. In this case, orc skin, but this recipe technically works for any kind of skin. Or skin tone more correctly. Now, we are starting out with the base of Cryptid Wraith and Hardened Carapace. This is a warm green and a brownish green mixed together to get a really dark base, because this is the most important thing. If you want to get a good skin tone, you have to start really dark. Even if you're going to go pale, unless you're going to go like pale, like icy white, then you shouldn't start with dark base. But everyone else, if you want a more living skin tone, a dark tone, a really dark tone is the best place to start. Now, don't be afraid at this stage, just slab it on. There's not anything you can do wrong at this point in that regard. We are going to work this up after this, but you need a good solid layer first. So make sure you have a solid slapped on layer first. And as I said, we're using Army Painter paints. You can use any paint you want. This is completely paint agnostic. I just happen to have a lot of army paints at hand, so that is what I use. But you can find equivalent paints in any other paint provider. And don't be afraid to mix either. Your paints are... Work with the paints that make you happy, basically. What works for you. There's no wrong here. Now, I think you should remember, though, is that in doing this, when you're going to paint skin, always try to have a plan when you start. Because once you start laying it down, it's difficult to go in and change the tone without starting all over again, because it's really hard to match things up afterwards. But yeah, in this case, if you're doing classic orc skin, we're starting with dark green. For you humans, you could start with a dark brown, or in some cases even an almost blackish brown, depending on what skin tone you're going for. Now, I have no idea what I was doing here. Mixing colors most likely, because that's a thing you have to do too. And then you just go in with a mix, in this case, of Goblin Green and Scale Hide, which is a greenish... Scale Hide is like pale green, and Goblin Green is rather foresty green. Mixed together to make sure that you have a good step up. Again, as I said before, this is a stage you can just repeat as many times as you want. Keep the layers thin, the most important thing, as thin as you can. And it's frustrating because if you keep them as thin as you want, sometimes it doesn't seem like doing anything, but you have to trust the process. This is an additive process. You add more, the more you add, the more you get out of it. Now, this first layer don't have to be all that precise. You can just make sure you leave some of the dark paint in the recesses of the body, like the deepest cuts to the muscles and in other places where you would think the sun doesn't necessarily hit. But then with each progressive layer, you're going to have to be more and more careful, because you have to be more and more precise. And this is why you keep it thin. Paint thin and diluted so you can correct any mistakes. And if you should for some reason end up in a position where you have put paint but it's not supposed to go at this stage, you stop. You can add some inks, or if you have the original color, you can go in and carefully put that back where it's supposed to be. But again, the more layers you add, the more difficult this becomes. Now, we're not using any specific light source in this case. You could pick a single light source and then make out all the highlights and shadows based on that. But in this case, just felt it was just a more general overall highlight. And if you have a object source that emits lights, like for example a torch or something, it's good to do this step first, get the skin and the all other details first, and then do the object source lighting. I know some people do them interchangeable, but I think it's easier to just do the skin first and then make sure that then gives the correct values to the rest of it. But yeah, pretty much what you do is you have these two colors, the camo green, goblin green, or in the scale height in this case, and you just make sure you have a gradient from one to the other. A gradient, for those not knowing, is when you go from one color to another. All the stages in between there is the gradient. A classic one is from black to white, and you have several shades of gray in between, from a very dark gray to a very light gray and then white. That's a gradient. But we use this in this case because we want to build up a light hitting skin, making it look brighter and brighter, and by adding more and more of the scale height, you get a green that is related to the previous green before that one, but not entirely different from it, but different enough that you see different shades and tones. And it's also worth pointing out at this point that sometimes you see this and it's like, oh my god, this is so strong. Most paints lose some brightness once they dry, not only because the light isn't hitting wet paint anymore, but also because they dull down a bit. So don't be afraid. If you feel like you might have overdone it, take a step back, let the colors dry properly, and then continue once you see where you're at. This is also a stage where you can add some inks or such as to bring it down a bit more. Now, if you, on the other hand, feel you aren't getting the effect you want, something you can do is adding a little bit of thick layer of paint and then going on with the inward brighter paint and doing something that's called a wet blend, where you let the two colors blend naturally on the surface. It's a difficult technique to master, but something you can try if you feel that you're not getting the proper smoothness of it, because it creates very smooth effects. But yeah, this is pretty much it. This is how you paint a quick and tabletop ready orc skin, or well, any skin for that matter. And I don't know, we're going to tackle armor next, and specifically weathered armor. That video will be coming out probably Tuesday, if not too busy with other things. And we're going to do more into painting skin later on too, because we're going to do a few more things. We have a few other things going on. But yeah, this is a simple technically 4-color, but a 2-color skin tone. You can do more complex pattern if you want, but usually 2-3 paints is enough to get a new, nice, smooth gradient of skin. Don't be afraid to test it. Now, it's a bit fussy, but I try to show off a bit of the up close and personals of it, so you can see a bit better how the transitions look. But yeah, try skin, it's not dangerous. Yeah, that pretty much is it. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, and do play fair. Bye!